The stadium was packed. More than 70,000 people stood beneath the bright lights, waiting for the national anthem to begin. Veterans filled the field. Active duty soldiers stood beside them. Thousands of fans raised their hands in silence. Then the announcer spoke. "Please join us in honoring decorated Army veteran Sergeant Daniel Mercer." The cameras found him immediately. Daniel was 72 years old. He wore a dark jacket, a row of medals, and the same worn military watch he had carried for almost 50 years. The crowd began to applaud. Slowly, Daniel walked toward the center of the field. Then the music started. Everyone stood. Every soldier raised a hand. Every veteran saluted. But Daniel did not. He kept both arms at his sides. The stadium fell quiet. At first, people thought he had not heard the announcement. Then the camera zoomed closer. His eyes were fixed on the empty seat beside him. A young man in the crowd shouted, "Salute!" Another voice followed, "Show some respect!" Within seconds, thousands of people were watching the old veteran. The television cameras captured every movement. The announcer stopped speaking. The music continued, but Daniel still refused to raise his hand. Then someone in the front row noticed something. His right hand was shaking, not from weakness, not from fear. He was holding something, a small folded piece of paper. The stadium became completely silent. Daniel looked toward the sky. Then he whispered, "I already gave my last salute." No one understood what he meant. The cameras moved closer. A military officer stepped toward him. "Sergeant Mercer, is everything all right?" Daniel looked at the officer. For a moment, it seemed as if he might finally raise his hand. Instead, he reached into his jacket. He removed an old silver medal. Then he placed it on the empty seat beside him. The entire stadium watched. No one spoke. No one moved. And then Daniel said something that changed the meaning of the ceremony forever. "This seat belongs to the man who never came home." The crowd froze. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone expected, because the man Daniel was honoring had not been listed as a hero. His name had disappeared from official records. His family had spent 47 years believing he had abandoned his unit. And Daniel Mercer, the decorated veteran standing in the middle of the stadium, had remained silent about the truth for nearly half a century, until that night. Before we reveal why Daniel refused to salute, you need to know what happened during a mission no one was supposed to remember, because the secret did not begin inside a stadium. It began 47 years earlier, on a cold night, thousands of miles from home. 47 years earlier, Daniel Mercer was 19 years old and terrified of becoming the kind of soldier everyone expected him to be. He had joined the army because his father had served. His grandfather had served. In his hometown, military service was more than a career. It was a tradition. But Daniel had never told anyone the truth. Beneath the uniform, he was afraid. Not of training, not of long marches. He was afraid that when the moment came, he would freeze and someone else would pay the price. That fear followed him through basic training until the day he met Private Samuel Reed. Samuel was older by 6 years, taller, calmer, and impossible to intimidate. He had a quiet sense of humor and a habit of carrying a small notebook in his chest pocket. Every night, he wrote one sentence about the day. He said he wanted to remember the people, not the missions. Daniel and Samuel were assigned to the same unit. Within months, Samuel became the person Daniel trusted most. When Daniel doubted himself, Samuel reminded him that courage was not the absence of fear. "It's knowing you're afraid," Samuel once said, and refusing to leave someone behind. Daniel remembered those words for the rest of his life. Their unit was deployed overseas during a period of growing conflict. The mission was described as routine: enter an isolated mountain region, locate a missing communications team, recover sensitive equipment, and return before sunrise. There were 12 soldiers. The operation was expected to last 4 hours. It lasted 3 days. On the first night, their convoy lost radio contact. On the second, a violent storm blocked the only safe route back. By the third morning, the unit had reached an abandoned communications station high in the mountains. The missing team was gone, but inside the station they discovered something unexpected: a locked metal case. No official report mentioned it. No mission briefing had prepared them for it. Their commanding officer ordered the case opened. Inside were damaged radio files, handwritten coordinates, and a list of names. One name appeared repeatedly: Samuel Reed. Daniel stared at the papers. "Why is your name here?" Samuel looked confused. "I've never seen this before." Before anyone could investigate further, an explosion shook the station. The lights went out. Dust filled the room. The mountain road outside had collapsed. The soldiers were trapped. Their commander ordered everyone to prepare for an emergency evacuation. But the radio system was damaged. Only one transmitter remained operational. Someone had to climb to an exposed communications tower and manually send a distress signal. The storm was getting worse. The tower stood nearly 100 feet above the station. The wind was strong enough to knock a man off balance. No one volunteered. Then Samuel stepped forward. "I'll do it." Daniel grabbed his arm. "You don't have to." Samuel looked at him. "Yes, I do." He removed the small notebook from his chest pocket and handed it to Daniel. "Keep this safe." Daniel shook his head. "You'll be back in 10 minutes. Samuel smiled. "Then you can give it back." He climbed into the storm. For several minutes, the unit watched his silhouette moving higher through the rain. Then the radio transmitter came alive. A signal reached headquarters. Rescue aircraft were dispatched. The mission had succeeded, but Samuel never came down. A second explosion struck the upper section of the station. The communications tower collapsed into the darkness. Daniel ran toward the exit. Two soldiers held him back. He shouted Samuel's name until his voice disappeared. By sunrise, the rescue team arrived. They searched the mountain for 2 days. No body was found. No equipment was recovered. Only Samuel's damaged identification tag was discovered beneath the collapsed tower. The official report declared him missing. Months later, the status changed. Presumed dead. But something else happened. The mission report was sealed. The coordinates disappeared. The list of names was removed, and Samuel Reed's name was never added to the memorial wall. Daniel asked why. No one answered. He wrote letters. No response. He requested the mission records. Denied. For years, Daniel carried Samuel's notebook everywhere. He never opened it. He believed it belonged to Samuel. He believed Samuel would return for it. But time passed. Daniel left the army. He built a life. He married. He became a father. He grew older. Yet every year, on the anniversary of the mission, he visited the military memorial alone. And every year, he raised his hand, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for the friend whose name had vanished. Then, 20 years after the mission, Daniel received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence: "Stop asking what happened to Samuel Reed." Daniel showed no one. He burned the envelope, but he never stopped searching. And 47 years later, the truth was finally about to find him. Because 3 weeks before the stadium ceremony, a young military archivist discovered a sealed file hidden behind a false wall. Across the front were 6 words: Mercer and Reed, do not release. 3 weeks before the stadium ceremony, military archivist Emily Carter was cataloging documents scheduled for declassification. Most files were ordinary: training reports, supply records, personnel transfers, old photographs. But behind a loose wooden panel inside a storage room, she found a narrow metal box covered in dust. The label had faded. Only 6 words remained visible: Mercer and Reed, do not release. Emily checked the archive system. There was no record of the box, no authorization number, no explanation. She opened it. Inside were mission reports, radio transcripts, photographs, and a sealed statement signed by the commanding officer. At the bottom was a handwritten note: "If this file is ever opened, notify Sergeant Daniel Mercer." Emily searched for Daniel. It took 2 days. When she finally found him, he was living alone in a quiet town, repairing old radios in a small workshop behind his house. She called. Daniel answered after the 4th ring. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes. My name is Emily Carter. I work with the military archives." Silence. Then Daniel asked the question he had waited 47 years to ask. "Did you find Samuel?" Emily looked down at the documents. "I found something about him." Daniel closed his workshop. He drove 6 hours to the archive building. When he entered the room, Emily placed the metal box on the table. Daniel stared at it for a long time. Then he noticed the label. His hands began to shake. He opened the first folder. Inside was the original mission report, but several pages had been removed. Emily handed him a second document. This was hidden separately. Daniel read it. His face changed. The report explained that the mission had never been routine. The missing communications team had discovered evidence of an unauthorized operation. The metal case contained the proof that several officials had ignored warnings about dangerous equipment. Samuel's name appeared because he had discovered the problem before the mission began. He had tried to report it. Instead, he was ordered to remain silent. Daniel looked at Emily. So they knew? She nodded. They knew the mission was dangerous. And they sent us anyway? Emily did not answer. She opened the sealed statement. It was written by the commanding officer. The final paragraph explained what happened on the mountain. Samuel had climbed the tower. He transmitted the distress signal. Then he discovered that the station's emergency system was about to fail. If the damaged equipment overheated, the entire structure would collapse. Samuel stayed at the transmitter, not because he was trapped, because someone had to keep the signal active until the rescue aircraft received the unit's location. He knew he could leave. He chose not to. The commander wrote, Private Samuel Reed remained at the tower until every member of the unit was accounted for. Daniel read the sentence twice. Then he covered his face. For 47 years, he had believed Samuel disappeared in the explosion. Now he knew the truth. Samuel had stayed behind. He had saved 11 soldiers. But there was one more document, a recommendation for the highest military honor. Samuel's name was listed. The recommendation had been rejected, not because Samuel lacked courage, but because officially recognizing him would expose the unauthorized operation. His sacrifice had been hidden to protect reputations. Daniel stood. He walked toward the door. Emily stopped him. Mr. Mercer, there's something else. She placed a small envelope on the table. Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. Samuel's. The envelope had been recovered from the station weeks after the mission. It had never been delivered. Across the front were 4 words, for Daniel, if needed. Daniel could barely breathe. He opened it. Inside was 1 page. Samuel had written, If I don't come back, don't let them turn my story into anger. Tell my mother I was not afraid. And tell Daniel that courage is not standing where everyone can see you. Sometimes, courage is staying where no one will ever know your name. Daniel lowered the letter. For the first time in 47 years, he cried. Not quietly, not carefully. He cried for the friend he had lost, for the years stolen from Samuel's family, for the truth hidden inside a box, and for every salute he had given to a name that was never allowed to appear. Emily waited until Daniel could speak. Then she told him why the army had invited him to the stadium. This ceremony was not only honoring Daniel. The military had decided to restore Samuel Reed's record. His name would finally be added to the memorial. His family would receive the recognition denied to them for nearly half a century. Daniel looked at the empty chair beside the table. Will his mother be there? Emily lowered her eyes. She passed away 12 years ago. Daniel said nothing. Then he folded Samuel's letter, placed it inside his jacket, and made one decision. At the ceremony, he would not salute it, not because he had lost respect, not because he had forgotten his service, but because he had promised Samuel something. And before 70,000 people, he intended to make the entire country hear it. The stadium lights dimmed. 70,000 people stood in silence. The announcer repeated Daniel Mercer's name. Please join us in honoring decorated Army veteran, Sergeant Daniel Mercer. The cameras returned to him. Daniel stood near the center of the field. His medals reflected beneath the stadium lights. In his jacket pocket, Samuel's letter rested against his heart. Beside him was an empty chair. No one in the crowd understood why it was there. Then the national anthem began. The soldiers raised their hands. The veterans saluted. Thousands of fans stood with their eyes fixed on the field. Daniel did not move. His arms remained at his sides. The first wave of confusion passed through the stadium. People whispered. Some pointed. The television cameras moved closer. A commentator asked, "Why isn't he saluting?" Then someone shouted from the upper seats, "Salute!" Another voice answered, "He's a veteran. He knows better." Daniel heard them, but he remained still. His right hand touched the folded letter inside his jacket. The music continued. The cameras showed his face on the giant screen. Thousands of people watched an old soldier refuse to raise his hand. Then the announcer stopped. the stadium became quieter. A senior military officer walked toward Daniel. "Sergeant Mercer," he said softly. "Is everything all right?" Daniel looked at the officer. "Yes." "Then why aren't you saluting?" Daniel turned toward the empty chair. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he removed Samuel's silver medal from his jacket. He placed it on the seat. "This chair belongs to Private Samuel Reed." The stadium fell silent. The officer looked confused. "Samuel Reed?" Daniel nodded. "He served beside me. He saved my life." The giant screen showed an old photograph. Two young soldiers stood beside a military vehicle. Daniel smiled in the photograph. Samuel stood beside him. The crowd watched. Daniel continued. For 47 years, his name was missing. His family was told he disappeared. Some people believed he failed his mission. Daniel looked toward the empty chair, but Samuel didn't fail. He stayed behind. He kept the signal alive. He gave 11 soldiers a chance to come home. The crowd became completely silent. Daniel reached inside his jacket. He unfolded Samuel's letter. His voice shook as he read. "Tell my mother I was not afraid." Daniel stopped. He looked toward the sky. Then he continued. "Tell Daniel that courage is not standing where everyone can see you. Sometimes courage is staying where no one will ever know your name." No one moved. No one spoke. Even the cameras became still. Then Daniel folded the letter. He looked at the officer. "I have saluted for 47 years. I saluted every anniversary. I saluted every memorial. But tonight," he placed one hand on the empty chair. "Tonight, I will not salute you alone." The officer understood. He stepped beside Daniel. Then he lowered his hand. One by one, the soldiers standing on the field lowered theirs. The veterans followed. The entire stadium watched. For the first time that night, no one was saluting Daniel Mercer. They were honoring Samuel Reed. The giant screen changed. A black background appeared. Then white letters slowly filled the stadium. Private Samuel Reed lost in service. Honor restored. The crowd stood completely silent. Then the stadium speakers played an old recording. Samuel's voice. It had been recovered from the mission archives. The recording was damaged, but one sentence could still be heard. "If everyone else is safe, keep the signal open." Daniel closed his eyes. 47 years disappeared. For one moment, he was 19 again, standing beneath the mountain, waiting for his friend to return. But this time, Samuel was no longer forgotten. The crowd began to applaud, quietly at first, then louder. Thousands of people rose to their feet. The applause filled the stadium. Daniel remained beside the empty chair. Tears ran down his face, but he did not wipe them away. He looked toward the giant screen. Then he whispered, "You made it home." And suddenly, the entire stadium fell silent again, because someone had walked onto the field, an elderly woman. She moved slowly. A military officer held her arm. Daniel looked at her, then froze. He knew her face. It was Samuel's younger sister. She carried something in both hands, a small notebook. The same notebook Samuel had given Daniel before climbing the tower. Daniel reached inside his jacket. He had carried it for 47 years. But the notebook in her hands was different. She stopped beside him. "I found this after my mother died," she said. It was hidden inside her Bible. Daniel looked down. "What is it?" She opened the first page. Samuel had written one final sentence, a sentence no one had ever seen. "If Daniel comes home, tell him I never blamed him for leaving." Daniel could no longer speak. He held the empty chair. The stadium watched. Then Samuel's sister placed the notebook beside the silver medal. For the first time in 47 years, Daniel raised his hand. Not toward the flag, not toward the cameras, but toward the empty chair. And every person in the stadium raised their hand with him. 70,000 people. One silent salute for the soldier whose name had finally returned home. The applause lasted nearly 4 minutes, but Daniel Mercer heard almost none of it. He stood beside the empty chair, looking at Samuel Reed's name glowing across the giant screen. For 47 years, Daniel had carried a question that no medal could answer. Why had he come home when Samuel did not? Now, for the first time, he understood. Samuel had never wanted Daniel to spend his life carrying guilt. He wanted him to live. The ceremony ended, but Daniel remained on the field. One by one, the soldiers approached him. Some shook his hand. Others simply placed a hand over their hearts. No one asked him to explain himself again. The reason he had refused to salute had become clear. He was not rejecting honor. He was refusing to accept recognition, while the man who saved everyone remained forgotten. Later that night, Daniel sat alone inside the empty stadium. The lights had been turned off. Only the field remained illuminated. Samuel's silver medal rested beside him. So did the old notebook. Daniel opened it for the first time. For 47 years, he had believed it was wrong to read it, but now it felt like Samuel had finally given him permission. Most pages contained ordinary memories. A joke from training, a list of places Samuel wanted to visit, a note about calling his mother. Then Daniel reached the final page. There was a message, not written during the mission, written months before. If anything happens to me, I hope Daniel remembers that surviving is not something to apologize for. Daniel read the sentence again. Then he smiled. Outside the stadium, reporters waited. They wanted interviews. They wanted headlines. They wanted to know why he had remained silent for nearly half a century. Daniel gave only one answer: because some truth need time. The next morning, Samuel Reed's name was officially added to the National Memorial. His military record was corrected, his sacrifice was recognized, and the mission file was released to the public. For the first time, Samuel's family learned the complete story: the letters, the reports, the final transmission. Nothing could return the years they had lost, but the truth gave them something they had been denied: peace. A month later, Daniel visited Samuel's hometown. He stood outside the small house where Samuel had grown up. Samuel's sister opened the door. She invited him inside. On the wall hung photographs Daniel had never seen. Samuel as a child, Samuel graduating, Samuel wearing his uniform. Then she showed him one final photograph. It had been taken only days before the mission. Daniel and Samuel were standing beside a military vehicle. Both were smiling. On the back, Samuel had written, "Some people become family before you realize it." Daniel held the photograph for a long time. Then Samuel's sister asked, "Do you think he knew?" Daniel looked at her. Knew what? That he would be remembered? Daniel thought carefully. Then he answered, "I think he hoped someone else would be." That afternoon, Daniel visited the memorial alone. Samuel's name had been placed beside the names of thousands of soldiers, but beneath it was a new inscription. He remained so others could return. Daniel stood before the stone. He raised his hand. This time, there were no cameras, no stadium, no applause, only silence. Then he lowered his hand, because he finally understood something Samuel had tried to teach him decades earlier. Honor is not measured by how many people see you. Courage is not measured by how loudly the world applauds. And a hero does not become less heroic simply because history forgets their name. Sometimes, the greatest sacrifice happens where no one is watching. Sometimes, the bravest person is the one who stays behind. And sometimes, the most powerful salute is not the one you raise. It is the truth you refuse to let disappear. Daniel turned away from the memorial. For the first time in 47 years, he did not look back. He no longer needed to. Samuel was home. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments. What does true courage mean to you? And tell us what city or country are you watching from today? If you believe forgotten heroes deserve to have their stories told, support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about courage, sacrifice, hidden truths, and the people history almost forgot. Because somewhere, there may still be a name waiting to come home.